Let me tell you, right now is 100% the best time to hop in the Pokemon TCG. If you've been teetering on the fence about getting involved, I promise you now this is your sign to get started. You see, Pokemon have just made this product right here, and I promise you that with a few inexpensive changes, we can make this a top tier deck capable of winning events left, right and centre. And the absolute best part is that this deck will be completely future proofed too. Let me show you what I mean. So this League Battle deck released last week and I was stunned to see just how good it is. It has the level 3 play rating, which means it is the most competitively focused product Pokemon make. And if we look at the back, we can see exactly what cards are in here. The first thing that caught my eye was the 4 copies of Irida. This card has been as high as $10 before, and it is set to increase back to that lofty price tag soon, but more on that later. The most obvious standout here is the 3-2 Palkia V Star line. Palkia V Star has been regarded as the best deck in format in certain times, so to see so many in here is absolutely amazing. He is a 280 HP V Star Pokemon, so it's not easy for our opponent to KO. Its attack, Subspace Well, is very efficient too. For 2 energy, it does 60 plus 20 damage for each bench Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's. This can actually get out of hand real quick, and for 2 energy, it's very efficient. Its V-Star power though is our build around. It lets you grab 3 water energy from the discard pile and attach them to any of our water types. In the Pokemon TCG, anytime you can attach any extra energies, you have to take it seriously. And this lets you attach 3. This means you can power up 2 Palkia in a single turn, or let us use some other attackers too, like Radiant Greninja. Not only is Radiant Greninja a top tier card because of its ability, which lets you discard an energy from your hand and then draw 2 cards, which actually works really well with Palkia, eh? But its attack can literally end games before they even get started. Moonlight Shuriken does 90 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. And if your opponent only has 2 Pokemon in play with under 90 HP, you can just win the game right there. Or another example, if your opponent only has 2 of their evolving Pokemon that have under 90 HP, you can just KO them both, effectively stopping your opponent from playing the game. But it's not only that, but the threat of Moonlight Shuriken makes your opponent play differently. For example, if you're playing against a Lost Box deck, and they think you might threaten a Greninja, they have to prioritize getting down their Manaphy, because Manaphy blocks bench damage. This means they are now using their resources in a way that they really didn't want to, giving you the advantage. The only other Pokemon I want to draw your attention to here is Bibarel. Bibarel is a top engine that actually featured in the last World Championship winning deck. Bibarel has an ability, Industrious Incisors, which lets you draw until you have 5 cards in your hand. This will keep us ticking over very nicely. So that's all the good Pokemon in the deck, but that unfortunately leaves us with these 2 copies of Basculin, which we can definitely remove. And there are also a ton of trainers in here that, well, work, they're definitely not optimal. So luckily we can swap these out for some much better options too, and they're all very cheap. Irida can definitely stay. Irida is our backbone, letting us grab a water Pokemon and an item card too. This means we can search our Palkia pieces or Greninja and grab items throughout the game too, helping us keep moving throughout the game. Melanie can definitely stay as it allows you to attach a water energy from the discard pile and then draw 3 cards. And like I said earlier, being able to attach extra energy is absolutely great. Ultra Ball and VIP Battle Pass are also staying here too, because they are absolutely incredible format staples, which I can't believe are in this deck, to be honest. VIP Battle Pass used to be $10 each on their own, and you get 4 here. However, Choice Belt, Clara, 1 Heavy Ball, Leg Acuity and Roxanne, as well as Trekking Shoes, can all go, along with those Basculin and a 1-1 of the Bibarel line, because we don't really need a 3-3. And that leaves us with 17 spaces that we can use to make this deck absolutely unstoppable. First off, we're going to add a 4th Palkia V and a 3rd Palkia V Star, since these are our main attackers and we want to get them into play as soon as possible. The 2 Bidoof we do have, we're going to quickly change from the Bidoof from Silver Tempest, because it has an ability which makes it immune to damage whilst it's on the bench. This means it's safe from other Greninjas or anything like that. We're also going to add 1 copy of Luminion V2. This lets us grab a supporter card when we put it into play. This means we can always grab ourselves a Boss's Orders, Irida or Melanie at any time, keeping us nice and consistent. We're also going to add 1 copy of Drapion V. This card is solely here for the Mew VMAX matchup, since it can one-shot a Mew VMAX for 0 energy with its ability Wild Style. And since Mew VMAX is probably a top 3 deck in the format right now, Drapion seems like a fairly easy inclusion to make that matchup more manageable. Cross switches are a huge addition to this deck since we need 4 of them, but trust me, they are so worth it. Cross switch is an item card that when you play 2 of these at the same time, you can swap your opponent's active with one of their bench Pokemon, and then you can swap your active too. This means we essentially have access to boss's orders effect without having to play a boss's orders. This means our offensive output is so much more terrifying, especially when you consider that Irida can search for one of these cross switches too, and also grab a Pokemon at the same time, making it much easier to use cross switcher. Scary card. We're also going to add some Judge cards. Judge makes both players shuffle their hand into their deck and then draw 4 cards. One of Palkia's bad matchups traditionally is Lost Zone box decks, and they like to grow their hand over the course of the game to pull off some big combos late game. Judge helps us defend against that, as well as giving us a hand refresh too. Speaking of Lost Zone box, we're also going to add at least 2 copies of Lost Cities for that matchup too. This stadium puts KO'd Pokemon into the Lost Zone instead of the discard pile, and since Lost Zone box loves to recover their attackers with cards like Clara, we can stop them doing that by using Lost City. Even Gardevoir EX loves to recycle their 1 prize attackers too, like Brainwave Gardevoir, so if we can Lost Zone that, we actually make life harder for them as well. Big ticks in my opinion. So with those additions, we still have 6 cards left from our skeleton list, which looks like this. And I wouldn't recommend straying too far from the cards in this list in this quantity, if I were you. But now let's look at some other options we can use to finish off our deck, because now we can have some fun. Starting off with Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX. This card adds a whole new one-shot dimension to the deck, since Max Lance does 250 damage if you discard 2 energy from it when you attack. Combine this with a choice belt and you are now hitting 280 damage, which is the magic number, letting you KO Arceus V Star, Giratina V Star, and Lugia too. Although I would recommend playing a Fan of Waves with Calyrex too, since a lot of those decks do play V-Guard energy, which would keep them out of range of that magic 280 damage. And since we can always Irida for that Fan of Waves, we can then remove that V-Guard, making our Calyrex go bonkers. I don't mind it, honestly. Oddsukuno is a fun card that can paralyze your opponent's active with Wild Freeze. This is perfect for catching decks that don't play a lot of switching cards, like Lugia for example, and also bringing high HP Pokemon like Gardevoir EX or Mew VMAX back into range of Subspace Swirl, which is nice. And to be honest, auto paralysis is never a bad thing to have, you never know when it can come in handy. Alolan Vulpix V Star is a solid option that was seen in the EUIC winning deck via Alex Szymanski. And bear in mind that EUIC was currently the biggest ever Pokemon event, so Vulpix winning that carries a lot of weight. Vulpix Snow Mirage attack does 160 damage and goes through all effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, but it also makes Vulpix immune to damage from Pokemon that have abilities next turn. This can completely catch some decks off guard, like Gardevoir for example, so keep that in mind. Starmie V is a crazy strong attacker. For 2 energy you can use Energy Spiral, which does 50 for each energy your opponent has in play. This lets you take some monstrous big swing KOs versus energy intensive decks like Miraidon, Arceus and Gardevoir, all on a basic Pokemon which has free retreat too. This means if your opponent ever gets sloppy with energy attachments, you can always bench Starmie, attach an energy from hand, Melanie to Starmie or Star Portal, and take a massive KO. Honestly, Starmie is insane right now. I highly recommend playing it. Nestball is an awesome card that lets you search your deck for a basic Pokemon and put it straight into play. Seems a bit boring, but it does wonders for your consistency, especially if you miss VIP Battle Pass turn 1. Raihan lets you accelerate an energy from the discard pile and then search your deck for any card and put it into your hand. This works really well if you're trying to use Greninja twice in the game, since you can only Star Portal once. But then Raihan also works well with Oddsukuno if you're playing that too, since Melanie can't be used on any Pokemon that isn't a V Pokemon. So Raihan works well with them, as well as giving you some potential for some big swing KOs, since Raihan can always search for a cross switcher or anything like this. Path to the Peak and Lost Vacuum opens up the door to a disruptive route. Path to the Peak will stop your opponent's rule box abilities, like Lugia V Star Summoning Star, Genesect V's Fusion Strike System, and Arceus V Star Star Birth. Since after you use Star Portal, you're not really 100% reliant on rule box abilities, so you can get away with playing Path to the Peak. And then if you want to use your abilities again, to maybe use a Lumineon for example, you can use Irida to search out your lost vacuum, so then you can remove the path if you need to. An extremely strong combo, especially if utilised with Judge, since you can limit your opponent's options. Cancelling Clone allows you to use Moonlight Shuriken when your opponent has Manaphy in play, since it turns off your opponent's active Pokemon's ability. Can be absolutely game defying if pulled off right, since you can KO 2 Volts at the same time for example, or 2 Comp Phase, or anything like this. The only problem with this is that you have to combine Cancelling Clone with a boss's orders or double cross switch a turn. So it's quite a big combo, but if pulled off can be incredibly strong. Escape Rope is a solid card that works like a switch, but it also makes your opponent switch their active too. Very good for disruption and moving your active as well. Trekking Shoes is never a bad addition to be honest. These let you dig through the deck without having to use supporters or abilities, while also hopefully getting water energies in the discard pile too. Honestly, Trekking Shoes is never a bad addition, and 4 of them came in the deck as well. Roxanne is a killer disruption card since it can give your opponent a 2-card hand in the late game. The main problem with it though is trying to find it on the turn you need it. But if you're playing Lumineon V, it's actually really easy. You can combine Roxanne with a double cross switcher KO turn or anything like this, and honestly it can be crazy strong, as well as giving you a 6-card hand as well. Kelvin V Max has a technically unlimited damage cap. Its max freeze attack does 120 damage plus 50 for each water energy you discard from the Kyurem. And with Melanie and Star Portal, you can ramp this really fast. And that's without mentioning Kyurem's ability, Glaciated World, which lets you discard the top card of your deck, and if it's a water energy you can attach it to one of your Pokemon. I think if you want to include Kelvin V Max, you might need to overhaul the deck a little bit more to support it by playing a 4th Melanie for example. But if you like the idea of a technically unlimited damage cap beat stick, then Kyurem is definitely the card for you. So as you can see, this deck is absolutely insane. Look at all these options, and they're all viable too. But the main reason why I'm making this video and recommending this deck to you if you're new to the game is that this deck is 100% future proofed. And is likely probably going to get even better too. You see, in our next set, Paldea Revolve, Chien-Pao EX and Baxcalibur are set to be a massive archetype. Baxcalibur lets you attach as many water energies from your hand to your Pokemon in a turn, and Chien-Pao does 60 for each water energy you discard from your Pokemon, allowing for some crazy high damage output. Chien-Pao even lets you grab 2 water energy from the deck whilst it's in the active. And the best part is Palkia V Star will go straight into this deck, since Star Portal is equally bonkers too. 4 Irida goes into this deck as well, and so will Greninja, meaning you won't have to really buy many cards to adapt this deck into a Chien-Pao deck. Then there is even going to be a battle deck which will have some of those pieces too. And I'm not just saying how crazy this deck is, I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is, since Chien-Pao will probably be the deck I take to the North American International Championships here in July. So with all that being said, I am very excited for you to start your Pokemon TCG journey. Let me know in the comments what options you're going to pick and which ones are your favourite.